Today, roughly 100 domestic workers are going to lobby on Capitol Hill. They're pushing for national support of the first ever National Domestic Workers Bill of Rights. Legislation was introduced by Senator Kamala Harris and Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal.
The National Domestic Workers Alliance collaborated with lawmakers on this bill, which is aimed at ensuring these workers receive civil rights and labor protections. Joining us now to discuss the landmark legislation is the director of the National Domestic Workers Alliance, Ai-jen Poo, and we're also joined by June Barrett, a home care worker, and we're so glad to have you here, ladies.
Thank you.
June, let me start with you. Why are you here and what are you asking for?
The reason why I'm here is that, first and foremost, I'm a domestic worker working in the elder care industry, and I experience a lot of, for example, sexual harassment within the industry. And with sexual harassment, there is absolutely no protections for me. And also, within taking care of the elderly, also there's no, say, protection in the home against injury. For example, I hurt my hip and I had to go through 6 months of physical therapy and my own turning up to work to take care of my clients while I was injured, because I dare not take a day off, as when I go back I would be without work. So that is the reason why it's very important. Being here on the Hill is very important to me, because it is important that we get a national protection, and that is why I believe that the National Domestic Workers Bill of Rights is very important.
Well, I mean, so tell us what's in the National Domestic Workers Bill of Rights. I mean, I can't agree, that's disgusting, and you're right. I mean, this is a very vulnerable population to the whims of the wealthy who hire these people and can pretty much treat them however which they want. It's almost barbaric, really, in its origins. So what are the types of worker protections that we're trying to institute through this types of legislation?
Well, it's a very comprehensive new framework for rights for this workforce, and it not only addresses the long history of exclusion from basic protections that you and I take for granted, but it also establishes new rights that are really about the specific nature of working isolated behind closed doors when your workplace is somebody else's home. There's just some specific vulnerabilities, as well as some new ways in which domestic workers almost signal the coming of the future of work, in terms of the lack of predictability of hours, the lack of access to a safety net and benefits, the lack of training or job security. So we try to address that for domestic workers in a way that sets the stage for more and more workers who are working in non-traditional jobs to also have protections.
Ai-jen, give us a little bit of the history here. Why have domestic workers been written out of some of the landmark labor protections that have been passed throughout our country's history?
This is a story that a lot of people don't know. When the New Deal was being debated in Congress in the 1930s, two landmark pieces of labor law were discussed: the National Labor Relations Act, which established the right to form a union, and the Fair Labor Standards Act, which is our kind of wage and hour framework. And both of those bills, Southern members of Congress refused to support if they included protections for domestic workers and farm workers who were African American at the time. So it's a legacy of slavery in the United States, and that racial exclusion has shaped conditions for this workforce for generations now, more than 80 years. So this is an issue and a workforce and a piece of legislation that truly the time has come.
Yeah, I didn't know that about the history, and that is, I mean, it makes complete sense given the time period.
I mean, it's only recently that the minimum wage was made to apply to domestic workers, isn't that correct?
Exactly.
During the Obama administration?
That's right. We had a home care rule change process that brought 2 million home care workers under minimum wage and overtime protections for the very first time since that exclusion in the 30s.
Yeah, so June, I mean, could you just explain what is it like to work in somebody's home without protections? It must be just, you must be very vulnerable to your employer.
Extremely vulnerable. And we talk about the minimum wage, but one of the big issue within domestic work, within my industry, personal experience, is wage theft. Sometimes, you know, you're supposed to work a 5-day, Monday to Friday. Families will ask you, can you just stay for the weekend because a particular carer cannot turn up? You still get paid for that 5 days, and you dare not ask the question, what happened to my 2 days pay. So we experience wage theft. One of the issues also around safety is that there are employers who give you a box of gloves and they expect that box of gloves to last for a month. Domestic workers having to go into their pockets to buy gloves to protect themselves from diseases. For example, I got very ill from a client who have shingles because the doctor told the family I did not, never had chicken pox. Therefore, they should get a carer from the agency who have had chicken pox. They did not. I almost died getting adult chicken pox.
Wow.
So there is absolutely, it's a free-for-all in the industry. Sexual harassment, I experienced sexual violence. At the time, I did not even know about the National Domestic Worker. I did not know about the Miami Worker Center. I suffered that in silence. I suffered that in silence. So that's why it is so important, and I'm dedicating my life, not my time, my life, to organize the domestic workers and to fight to make sure that this bill in my lifetime becomes a reality.
And June, what has the response been like from your fellow domestic workers?
Oh my God, they are, a lot of them, they can't take a day off. They can't take a day off because they will, to lose a day's pay as a domestic worker, come on, it's like you're going to be losing a month rent, so they can't take a day off. But I've been working along with them and talking to them, and they're excited. They support my twin sister, who is a house cleaner. She's my biggest supporter. She tell everyone about the work that I'm doing.
Good.
Although she can't manage to not clean a house, to come to a meeting, but they sign in to the national. I've got women who sign up to be members of the paid due members of the National Domestic Workers Alliance because they can't be there, but they say, June, this is what I'm going to do. So they are excited. I have people calling me all day yesterday saying, we are so happy that you are doing the work, and we are going to be supporting NDAA by the smallest donation possible. So they are excited. They're excited about this.
Well, I'm glad that we could feature you both on the program. And I guess final question here is, what are the next steps? What do people need to know about where this legislation is going to go?
Well, the legislation has been introduced officially, which is a big deal for us after 80 years of exclusion, so we're excited. And we're asking members of Congress to sign on as co-sponsors and to move this bill forward. We have a chance here to make these jobs that have been undervalued and vulnerable actually very good jobs for the future. And they're some of the fastest growing occupations in our entire workforce. So the opportunity to do that is huge.
And where can people learn more about you?
Domesticworkers.org.
There we go.
And Ai-jen, something we were talking about is factory jobs, industrial jobs were not always good jobs, right? Those rights were fought for. We made them strong, solid, protected middle-class jobs, and we should do the same for workers like June.
Exactly.
Thank you both so much. Great to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up on Rising, we're going to talk to one of the authors of an explosive new book about Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh's contentious confirmation process. Carrie Severino, Policy Director of the Judicial Crisis Network, joins us to discuss the Kavanaugh confirmation. She says it came at a cost to public discourse and also U.S. institutions. That discussion on Rising continues.